Good morning, everyone. Good morning to you, Lori. I'm waiting a couple of seconds while everyone comes in.
Sounds good. And how are you today, Lauren?
I'm doing good. It's been a busy week, but a good week. How about yourself?
I know it's been a crazy week. And can you believe it's May already?
No, nope.
I know. I remember my mother always used to say that time flies when you get older. I don't know if that's the case or not. I don't even know where that's, maybe one of our guests can say, hey, my mother used to say that too. I don't know if that's that old time thing, but I think it's true because every year I get older, I feel like there's less hours in a day. I'm supposed to be slowing down, but no, that's not the case.
Yeah, totally not the case. It just continues to pile on and time just continues to fly on by.
It does. Yeah, and to all those younger ones out there in the audience, which is probably, I'm at the age where everybody's kind of younger than me now. Life gets better as you get older. I remember when I was younger, people say that, and I'm like, they're just jealous because they're not young and fit anymore. I'm like, no, now I'm like, it's better. It gets easier, guys. So just know this is a little life lesson. Yes, we are here for business discussions, but life does get easier as you get older.
I think everyone needs that reminder though, Lori, so I appreciate it.
It really does. And I think, I don't know whether it changes or you just don't care.
It might be the latter, but again, who cares?
I know. I mean, I tell people the older I get, the less I care about anything and the more happy I become. But anyway, I'm going to hand this over to you, Lauren. You take it away.
Oh, that's funny. Emma says, I think it's that too. Well, let me get us started. So good morning to everyone, all of our viewers, new and old. Thank you for joining us this morning. My name is Lauren Simpson and I'm with the SBDC. And I'm joined today with my colleague, the amazing guru of all numbers. And maybe I need to call you the goddess of numbers now, Lori. Lori Williams.
As we talked about that, if I become the goddess, that means I got a magic fairy thing and I can change numbers. So where Deborah's the goddess of social media, I think that being the goddess of numbers might be problematic. It could lead to fraud.
Okay, we're scratching that completely out. Give me a couple of seconds. I'm going to quickly share my screen and get us started. For those of you who are new, I am going to give you all a quick overview as to who we are, the company that I represent, and then we'll dive into today's session. So again, good morning to you all. Thank you for joining us. My name is Lauren Simpson, and I'm with the SBDC, or the Small Business Development Center. The SBDC is a national program with over 1,000 locations throughout the country. So regardless of what state you might be in, you are able to connect with a local SBDC office. And you'll want to do so because we offer no cost services to local small businesses. And it's at no cost to you, because your tax dollars have already covered all of our fees. So please do make sure you take part in our resources. And now for the Los Angeles area, my network covers the Los Angeles County, as well as Santa Barbara and Ventura counties. And if you take a look at the map in front of you, you can see the locations that we have. You'll notice that there's one in Camarillo over to Santa Clarita, down to Pasadena, and then all the way down to Long Beach. So again, make sure you get in contact with one of our offices. Here's a deeper dive into what it is that we do. We offer no cost business advising. And so you're able to sit with a business expert, which is one of our business advisors, like Lori Williams, or someone who has expertise in marketing, business planning, social media, like Lori mentioned with Deborah Darras. We have tons of resources for you, so make sure you tap in. And then we also offer virtual trainings, much like the training you have joined this morning. Again, we're here to help, so be sure to get in contact with us as soon as possible. You can reach us by phone, 866-588-7232, or online, smallbizla.org/new client. For those of you outside of the Los Angeles area, you can reach out to americassbdc.org/your SBDC. And really quick, the California Dream Fund is happening now. We currently have our registration open, so be sure to go to smallbizla.org/dream fund. And for brand new businesses, you have the ability to go through our training course, and then once at completion, you're able to then apply for a grant up to $10,000. There will be $5,000 and $10,000 awards. Any further questions? I'll be sure to put that link in our chat. With that, Lori, I'm going to stop my screen share.
Okay.
And before I hand over the reins, I want to be sure that I do some quick housekeeping. Again, for those of you who are new and old, be sure to put all of your questions into our Q&A. Again, all questions in the Q&A, I want to be sure that Lori is able to take a look at them. And then the chat's going to be reserved for any links and resources that Lori would like me to share with you. So again, thank you so much for joining us. And Lori, take it away.
Hey, thanks, Lauren. Okay, guys, I got a couple quick tips to share with you. And as always, Lauren's shoving us all into the chat. Now, I want to give everybody an EIDL update. Now, most of the people who have an EIDL loan, you probably received an email from the SBA. You already know what I'm talking about, but just in case it went into that spam, I want to make sure you know. So the EIDL update is that you must apply for any EIDL increase. Please note, guys, I said EIDL increase, not new loan application increase. So if you already have an EIDL loan and you have not yet applied for an increase, you can no longer do so after May 6th. That's really what I want you to know. So if you haven't, make sure you apply by May 6th. And even if you had, or you're in the process of reconsideration, which I'm working with a lot of people through the reconsideration process, it's going to be still available as long as funds are available, okay? And I don't know how long that will be. So you want to stay on top of it. What I like to tell everybody and everybody that I'm helping during this process is you need to go through and call them and email them and stay on top of them. I've had a lot of good successes with people getting the increase when they got denied because of documents or what have you. But it does require staying on top of it, emailing them, having all the documents, etc. If you're having any problems, send an email to Lauren. Like I said, I've been doing the EIDL for quite some time and got a good understanding of the process. Maybe I can help you with it, but mostly I want everybody to know the clock's ticking now, guys, so be on top of it. Lauren's also going to throw this in. This is just some helpful information from the IRS. Where to check for your refund, if you have a refund, if you're one of those lucky ones with a refund, okay, how you check for your refund. And the very bottom one is the IRS just launched its National Small Business Week. So they've launched this resource page for anybody that's starting a business. It's a pretty cool page to check out. It says what taxes do you need to pay, etc. So you can get some good information. They got some classes, some videos and everything. So even if you're not just starting a business, but you're still wanting to know some information about taxes and small businesses, take a look at that link. It is pretty good. Upcoming classes. I wanted to let you know these are classes that I'm holding outside of this talk. Lauren's putting these links in. Tomorrow, I'm going to talk about sales tax. A lot of people, especially those selling online through possibly Shopify, are not familiar with how sales tax needs to be collected on sales out of state, pending on the state's requirements. And so a lot of times they're not collecting the sales tax. So this is just a pretty quick webinar that goes through what you need to know. There was a change in sales tax requirements as of, I think it was 2015, somewhere around there. And so I'm updating everybody on this to make sure you're following the proper sales tax collections. Then on the 19th and the 26th, I'm holding 2 financial literacy classes. One of them, the first one is just an overview to the accounting requirements. I go through what type of accounting systems you can use, how you could just use an Excel, what information do you have to collect for taxes. It's really just a complete overview of it. And then on May 26th, I've talked before about the Excel document and how you should be able to calculate your profitability. And I did that demonstration, I think it was 2 weeks ago. I go into detail on that concept, the cost structure, how to calculate the percentages, etc. You can sign up for either one. Once again, Lauren's going to put all of those links into the chat. And then upcoming shows next week. Really good show. Once again, we got Abby. She's going to come on and talk about, as an herbalist, how she started out doing herbal consulting and then created a product, took her product from selling online to now some retail outlets, and all the different things that happened along the way, share her expertise and experiences that she had. Then on the May 25th, I'm going to come back with a special Ask Lori. Got great reviews when I did that blank Excel document I was just talking about a little bit. So we're going to start out with another blank Excel document, and I'm going to take off on where I left off in the last one, once again, going through this cost structure. And then June 1st, welcome back Emma Green. For those of you who saw one of our first shows, and you know, Emma's always in the audience. So happy to see Emma always there. Asked her to come back. And Emma, I wrote what you're going to talk about without telling you, so I hope this is okay. I said, discuss all things, pivoting, selling online classes, marketing, and more. I just put a big everything next to your name, Emma. And then on June 15th, I'll give you information on who's going to come on and speak, but it's going to be a really interesting show. It's a company that was a restaurant locally, and they had a lot of hits during COVID, as many restaurants did. And at the end, they decided to sell the restaurant. And so she went through the whole aspect of how to sell it, choosing to find a broker to help her sell it. And she's going to come on and tell you, if you ever get to that point, what you should have ready just in case you ever do. It's going to be one of those really good, heartfelt discussions. But, you know, even if you're not planning on selling the company, at least to know what you would have to have ready if you ever did. So that's what's coming on the next show. So with that, going to this show, I'm really excited to welcome our guest, Stefan. Now, Stefan, I've been promising to come on for some time because I said, hey, he owns a food truck. We've had several requests about the food truck. So even though I wanted to bring him on to talk about the food truck, my excitement of bringing him on is I've met him, I can't even remember, I'll have to tell you when he comes on here, at least 3 years ago, 4 years ago, maybe longer, once again through the SBDC. And one of the things about Stefan is he is always looking for a solution. I tell him he's become almost the serial entrepreneur. He's one of those people, like many of our other guests, that just kind of go at every situation, figure out a solution, has a lot of experience and a lot of great advice, from technical advice to just inspirational advice. So I am really excited to welcome Stefan to the show. Welcome, welcome.
Hey, everybody. Hey, Lori, thank you for that amazing introduction.
Hey, hello, my old friend. How are you? How long ago did we first speak? 4 or 5 years?
I was just thinking, I think it's been 7 years.
Oh, see, that's the thing with my age. I never pay attention, you know?
Yeah, I think it was 2015. It may have been sooner.
Wow. Yeah, because I remember that you were referred to me from the SBDC for some other idea you had. So what we're going to do is I am going to really let you start. I didn't even tell anybody your background. I wasn't going to give it away. So I'm going to let you start and say, hey, where have you been? Where are you going? What was the beginning?
Yeah. Let me get my lighting adjusted here one sec. So the beginning, oh geez. I grew up in upstate New York, and I went to school for engineering, industrial engineering. So, you know, that was kind of, I started out very much on that track, working within the automotive industry, worked for Toyota, switched over to the brewing industry, and that got into learning how to kind of do process improvement in manufacturing was mainly what I was doing. From there, I lived in Cincinnati for a while. I moved out to California in 2008, and started to get into the craft beer scene, and was, you know, that about 2008 was when the craft beer scene was picking up. The economy was tanking, but beer was doing great. Maybe they're related.
Well, that usually happens, right?
And yeah, so I, being from upstate New York, near Buffalo in that area, I loved chicken wings. And so I started at my house in my backyard, just making chicken wings for primarily myself to start, and then family, then friends. And then, you know, I remember one day we had like 50 people at our house, you know, half of which we didn't even invite, that were there for the wings. So I was talking about it and like, well, maybe I'll take this to like a local farmer's market just for fun on the weekend. So I still have my day job. And I went to a little farmer's market in Sunset Beach and made chicken wings. It was quite the process. I had a trailer I was towing. I had like commercial fryers and hot oil, and oh my gosh, I think they repaved that parking lot after I left with all the oil. Yeah, we dumped on the ground, everything else. But that was kind of how I got started. And then talking to all these craft breweries, I would I asked them, well, hey, you guys don't have any food. What if I just set up a little tent out, sold chicken wings? And a lot of them were receptive to that. And that's kind of how it got started, as just a weekend hobby. Didn't have any kids at the time, offered a little more flexibility. And from there, my professional career was moving in different directions. I was working for a startup, automotive startup in California, and traveling to Finland. So there was a break in the action there for the wings for a while. And I was building it was a Fisker automotive. They're back on the map now. They went bankrupt for a while. But I was leading their manufacturing efforts in Finland, and then some of the design for manufacturing efforts in California. They went bankrupt. I went into aerospace, still making chicken wings on the weekends. And the aerospace company I worked there for a few years, and they ended up getting bought out, and it got a little, I don't know. The timing was right and I asked, talked to my wife, I'm like, what if I take the leap and actually get a food truck and continue to, sell these chicken wings? And my wife, being as very supportive, unreasonably so at times, we agreed, and I went for the jump. So I saw the picture of my resignation. I wrote on there, leaving to make less money, but make chicken wings and drink beer.
Oh my God, that is hilarious.
Yeah.
Well, your story, it's interesting because it was reminiscent of my beginning. I started my company at 25, and people say, were you inspired? Was it inspiration? And I said, no, part of it was desperation. I'd worked for these companies, and this one went under, this one didn't have the money to pay, this one didn't do this. And I said, you know what, if it's going to screw up, if my professional world's going to screw up, I'm going to screw it up. I'm not going to let somebody else screw it up. But you're right. I did go for less money, not necessarily eat chicken wings and drink beer, but definitely more hours and less money. And I have to say, every time I hear you talk, I grew up in the small country town, but it was about an hour outside of Buffalo. Still, we grew up on chicken wings. I mean, chicken wings was the thing. Everybody had chicken wings. So when I first met you, I was like, chicken wings, Buffalo, there we go. So when did you first, then you had to actually purchase a food truck, and I think it was you in a conversation with a couple other people that were in food trucks some years ago. Getting a food truck sounds like such a simple thing. It's really friggin' not. You got these cleaning and all these other things that goes into it. So food trucks are not as simple as one would think, are they?
No, absolutely not. There's I think the biggest struggle is it's, believe it or not, it's still a new industry, right? I think, sure, depending on where you date it, but like they really started going mainstream maybe like the 80s was like, the beginning, but where you think restaurants have been around for forever, right?
Right.
And the skill sets that go along with that. So I think, to your first point, getting the food truck, you can buy a used truck, right, and inherit someone else's sins, right, which is what I did because it was lower cost to get started, or you can build new, which is great because you can avoid a lot of maintenance costs and things like that. However, you may not know what you want, right, before you start. So my advice, even though it was painful getting a used truck, I had to retrofit it. I spent, hours designing, working with local food truck builders to almost rebuild a truck that I bought for, gosh, I don't know, it's maybe 50, 60,000 instead of 150, 60,000, right, for a new truck, to get it to where I wanted it. And then I started, and your customers are going to tell you what what you should sell more than what you want to sell. There's always these movies and things like, oh, I make the best whatever and I want to sell it to the world. And yeah, okay, that's great. But at the end of the day, it comes down to, what's selling, what do customers want, where is your target audience, and then where are your margins at too.
Yeah.
And chicken wings is one that the cost, chicken wings started because they were the scrap left over, right? And it was very low cost, but now it's one of the higher cost items at a restaurant.
Really?
From a food sale. Yeah. I actually bought a case recently and it was almost 3 times the cost per case now that it was when I started back
Wow.
in 2017 or whatever. So 2015, and then pandemic definitely took a price hit on that too.
Now, you also have to, like, once you have the food truck, and this was something I didn't know, you have to have a specialty cleaning of the food truck for your
Yeah.
permits and stuff. And then you have to figure out, where am I going to park it? Like, I can't just bring the truck home, park it in my yard, and take a garden hose to it, can I?
No. Yeah. So by state laws do vary, county laws vary. It's always to your county health department, but most of them have, at least in California for sure, you have to have it at a commissary, right? Which is a big parking lot that you pay way too much money for, maybe,
Yep.
I don't know what it is now, probably like over $2,000 a month, okay, just to park it there. And they'll have trash and water, and depending on where you are, that may be all it is. But it's quote unquote health department regulated. They can go and audit the lots, and your truck needs to be there every night by the health code, right?
See, and a lot of people don't know what you just said, because I didn't really know that until I started working with food trucks many years ago. I didn't realize that. And so that's a huge cost that you have to consider.
Yeah, for sure. And on top of that, you'll need somebody to clean the trucks, like you said. And that sounds simple, or some people starting out like me, I'm like, oh, I'll just clean it myself. Well, at the end of the day, it's a long day, right? It can be a 16-hour day, and you get back, and the last thing you want to do is spend another 3 hours or plus trying to clean it at night, right? In the dark, the cold, whatever. And so, finding someone to clean the truck was actually one of the challenges. There's not really any, maybe there's a business opportunity for somebody, but there's not really any like food truck cleaning outfits, right? It's just whoever happens to work at that commissary where you are, you find them, hopefully you can talk them into cleaning your truck, and most of them are busy and almost can't even take on new clients, right? So yeah, it's and that said, like, that kind of leads to, it's a 24-hour business. I ramped up, we had 2 trucks running. There was someone on the trucks maybe 22 hours a day. There was days where it was 24 hours a day, because by the time you get the truck back to the commissary, you get the cleaner on it, your prep crew's coming in, and oftentimes they're cleaning up from the previous day, and my prep crew's coming in, and they're like, we can't start prepping because they're still cleaning. It's like, and that, when I get the call at 4 a.m, hey, we can't prep, and we got to leave at 7 to get to wherever it is we're going. And so then, the juggling act begins. I mean, I'd sleep with my phone in my hand, right? So it was, expect it to be, if you really want to, ramp up and do good business, it's a 24-hour gig.
And we're going to get to who you marketed to in a minute, but I know, because it's right on the topic you're speaking of, one of the huge challenges that you had, this was pre-COVID even, is staffing.
Yeah.
I think out of all the conversations I've had with you, and we've had so many where it was loans, finance, everything, your biggest stresses that I feel on my end, you tell me, but was around staffing.
You nailed it. Number one. And that goes back to, me calling it a new industry. You can't hire a restaurant person and put them on a food truck and you're good to go. No, that's you also, you need someone that can drive a 28-foot truck. A lot of people are not comfortable with that. A 28-foot truck that was built in the 80s or 90s, if you buy a used one, right? We took a truck, one of my last events, we went to Lake Arrowhead, right? Up that mountain, up
Oh,
the edge of the, what do they call it? The edge of the world highway. Like,
yep.
can you imagine? On the way down, the brakes gave out at the,
Oh no, because I was going to say
yeah,
the way down is the scary part. I've seen a lot of
yeah,
brake issues. Oh, that had to have been scary.
yeah.
Chicken
And
wings
so,
all over Arrowhead.
yeah, exactly. And so there's a lot of stress, and because of that. So, I told my driver, you're going down the mountain, don't brake because you'll burn your brakes out. You've got to downshift, right? But it's things like that. So now you're looking for a chef, you're looking for someone that can drive a truck and have some mechanical inclination. And then let's say your fryer goes out and you're in the middle of the desert somewhere or wherever it is you're serving. They got to be able to fix the fryer, right? And if they're not
Yeah.
going to do it, guess who is? Me, right? I had a truck. I bought a truck and had every tool and spare part you can imagine in it, and I'm following it around, right? Doing the maintenance on the fly myself, because it's the only way to get it done. I mean, we were in situations where you'd have a line of 100, 120 people, and a fryer went out, and we're trying to cook chicken wings. And so I'm like, all right, you guys use that fryer. I'm climbing down on the ground and sticking my head underneath this thing, replacing a pilot, whatever it is, to get us back up and running. Because guess what? All these people have a 45-minute lunch, and they need to be fed and back to work. And if we don't do that, their bosses aren't going to ask us to come back. So
So guys, you see as Stefan goes from a corporate job to a food truck fryer repairman on the
oh
spot.
yeah, oh yeah, yep.
That's called entrepreneurship at its finest. It really is. And I didn't even think about the fact, yeah, they got to drive the truck, and then you had a lot of problems too with just getting people to stay and wages and all that type of stuff.
Yeah,
Just that you do have kind of that restaurant turnaround, but you have more specific functions. It's even harder to find, and it just was because I remember even I don't remember if it was for you or another client. We even were looking at recruitment firms. I think that was part of with you from the restaurant industry to see if we could at least start with somebody that had a familiarity with food. And that was even a challenge.
yeah, it really is. I've, when I first started, I'm like, well, we'll just hire people from restaurants and put them on the trucks and everything's fine. And that wasn't the case. It, and there was never a formula, right? Like I had really great employees and I kept them for years, right? My top employees I had the entire time because I paid them well, I treated them well, I did everything I possibly could. I never asked them to do anything I wouldn't do myself, right? But then, that's your maybe 20% of your labor, 20, 30%, but then the others, it can be a revolving door. And so then it becomes to how do you develop standards, right? And that was one thing coming from manufacturing and engineering, I was pretty good at, right? And so I developed standards for maintenance, for opening and closing, right? And then being able to do that on a mobile, because I can't go and see, did we check off our checklists, or did this get done, or did that get done? And so I had to figure out a way to do that electronically too. So yeah, there's it's a whole nother world for sure.
And I think where we need to let the audience know too, and I'm going to mention it, and then I'm going to say different aspects about it. So you weren't just driving down some streets, opening your truck and selling chicken wings. What you were doing is you were actually doing more corporate type events and different types of partnerships with other established businesses. And I think that helped you to increase the profit margin, because a myth buster that I believe I've seen, because I've looked at a lot of financials for food trucks, is this belief that I'm going to get one food truck, I'm going to run it myself, and I'm going to make money. And I see the only time, to be quite honest, when that works is when the whole family, who's the kids, aren't getting paid. When the whole family is running one food truck, it might make a large income, but food trucks don't make the kind of money, especially in the drive down the road, that you believe. So that was a whole lot. I said, I'm just going to throw it at you.
You nailed it. And I think that's like, so staffing is like number one. And then number two, that was one of the biggest surprises for me. Right. And it's funny because you get like, Hollywood and all these TV shows and things. And they're like, oh yeah, I'm going to park on the side of the road and all these people are going to show up and I'll just post on my Instagram and it'll be magic. It's like, no, that's not really how it works.
Okay, so I gotta stop there. Audience, you know how I'm always saying overnight success. Hollywood has taken over entrepreneurship, telling you a bunch of stuff that isn't true. I didn't pay him to say this. We just heard it again. Okay, I had to point that out. Thank you.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Yeah. The money in the industry is in those private events, building your brand, and getting, contracts with and recurring contracts with, like in LA, we worked with every movie and TV studio, every major corporation, almost every TV set you can think of, right? So it's getting those prepaid events, especially, that get you through. Now, if I could just get a truck and just do those only, that'd be great. But the fact of the matter is, what's your number one problem? Staffing. Okay. So I need to figure out a way to have my staff available for those prepaid events. So those prepaid events end up on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, every once in a while during the week, sure. But you can't, you definitely can't run this business with finding weekend staff. It's not a reliable way to do it. So you have to employ them full time. And that's where you add a whole bunch of stress and time for not that much money, right? But you need to do it to keep your staff. So to explain that a little further, we would do lunches, right, at office buildings and things like that. And they were hit or miss. I mean, sometimes you'd do great. Sometimes it was not great, but you got to give the hours to your employees to keep your employees. So when you do get the big events, you can go hit it, right? And sometimes those events come in hours before you need to be there. And sometimes you got a week and sometimes you got a day, right? But if you don't have the staffing, you can't react quick enough and there's enough demand, enough supply out there that someone else is going to grab that event, right?
Yeah, and I remember at one point you were even trying to expand to see if you could get another food truck, but the staffing, not getting the food truck, it was the staffing. And
Yeah.
it's really challenging because here during the week you see your money flying out the door with all these expense and very little opportunity. Then weekend comes and you can't even take advantage of all of them because you're limited in food trucks and you're limited in staff. Where a restaurant, it can kind of just bring in more people, bring in less, have them stand out line, food trucks have, even though it has the flexibility of moving to the customers, it's got a whole nother angle to it that makes it more challenging.
Yeah, absolutely. And finding those reliable staff, that can they need to also be able to interface with the customer if I can't be there, and the client, right? And so can you get a fry chef that can drive a truck, can fix a truck or a kitchen, and also be face of the business to the customer when you can't be? Whew,
Yeah.
asking a lot, right?
It's interesting because the world suggests that certain companies to start are easier than others. The world kind of says, well, that's an easy one to get into. That one's not. And what I find is it kind of has it opposite. The ones it believes that are the easiest to get into, they are sometimes the most tricky. And sometimes the ones like even consulting with a staff can be so hard to get the talent, even though there's not an upfront investment in the asset. It's really a matter of saying, what are the minute-to-minute, day-to-day processes that this business model is going to require to figure out the complexities?
Yeah.
Did you ever think all that was going to be that complicated when you just got your food truck?
No, I thought it would be as simple as when I have my pop-up tent, I talk to the brewery, I show up at the brewery, I sell some chicken wings, right? And in some cases that's what it was. But on the whole, you get your prepaid events, right? After you build your brand. Nobody's going to just there's so many food trucks out there. Nobody's going to be like, oh, let's try this, guy that just started yesterday. You get that first big client, you need to advertise that you had that big client to get the next big client, right? The day-to-day stuff, and overall, I would say, I don't have the percentage offhand, but typically most events have a booking agent. If it's not a prepaid event that you got yourself. and you're paying that booking agent anywhere from 10% to 40% of your revenue.
Wow. I forgot we talked about the booking agents. Now that you say that, I recall it. And the thing is, even though the corporate events are giving you the more stable and the profit, they're requiring a lot more cost as well. So it's kind of like a two-edged sword, you know. I
Yeah.
forgot about the booking agencies
Yeah.
that you have to do.
So everyone's got the dream of, I'm going to go to Coachella and sell a whole bunch of whatever. Yeah, you are. Maybe it's hard to get into Coachella. First of all, you need to have a good resume to get into Coachella. Once you've built that resume, which will take years, they're going to take 45% of your revenue. And you can say you can mark it up, and sure you can, but you realize your margins are still pretty slim. There's also going to be competition that can undercut with a lower quality product, right? The one edge that I typically had was that there wasn't a lot of chicken-based trucks, right?
Yeah.
And so I don't know if I was lucky or what, but I didn't do something that, like, you know, burgers are great, love burgers. There's a ton of burger trucks, tacos, Mexican food, you can't count it, right? You know, so there was less competition with the product that I chose, and that did help. But then with chicken wings being a higher cost item, it was, you know, sometimes a conversation with the clients. Well, yeah, we're going to be higher than the tacos, and, you know, but it's something different, right? And we're going to show up. And that was the other thing. A lot of trucks weren't reliable. And so because they've had maintenance issues and things like that. And so staying on top of your maintenance plan, making sure, like, we had weekly, daily, monthly checks on our trucks and our kitchen equipment to make sure we made it to all of our events. And we pretty much did make it to all of our events, and we were known as like a reliable truck. And building that into your reputation too is huge, but it's also a difficult thing to do given all the challenges. You can imagine these trucks are pulling more weight than they were ever designed to.
Yeah.
Right. And
frying things, deep frying, and the electrical and all that kind of stuff that's required for that. That makes it really complicated too. Now,
yeah.
I know right before COVID hit, we had one of our last conversations where it was kind of saying, well, do I want to grow? Do I want to get another food truck? Where do I want to go with this? You had been at it, you had done well with it, very well with it, grew it, but you were kind of saying, well, where am I going to go next? And I don't remember the time, because anything from 2 years ago seems like a blank to me, to be honest. But I don't think it was many months after you and I were having conversations about where you were going to go to next with the food truck, and then COVID hit. So I'm just going to leave it at that and say, take it from there. What would you like to share with everybody about what happened next?
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. And so it got to a point where we were doing pretty well. You know, our best year, we were over $1 million in sales.
That's a lot of chicken wings and beer.
Yeah, we were Cisco's top chicken wing buyer for our, like,
Wow.
from our distribution center. And, you know, I'm like, well, how do I scale? What's the next step? Because for me, I always want more, right? And
I know that about. That's why I said at the beginning. That's why, you know, like I said, I'm going to get him in to start talking about entrepreneurial growth, because this is where this is the part where I call him a serial entrepreneur. He's always thinking, what can I do next? Where can I go? Keep going.
Yeah. So, and it's in my blood. My grandparents on both sides were entrepreneurs. Like, it's always been inside of me even through college. Like, I've always wanted to do my own thing, right? It's not like I came up with this dream one day. It's just something inside me that I wish sometimes I could make it go away.
I can relate. I always say, I wish I could just be told what to do once, and then I could work for. I always say, my problem is I can't be told what to do. You know, I can make a decision, but I'm right with you. I've got that, you know, entrepreneurial gypsy spirit my whole life, and I'm 58, so pretty much, you know, it's a shoo-in. I'm going to live the rest of my life this way.
Right. But yeah, I mean, I established a brand in the food truck industry, right? Which is difficult to do, I would say, and a process, right? And that could be replicated. I could have franchised, but, you know, we talked about that. It just didn't seem like a good fit for me. And then, you know, I'm like, well, should I sell the business? And that's kind of where I was like, well, I could, because this is now, besides the labor piece, and I could, include labor, but whatever, like, in some training and things, it could be handed off and I could explain the process and this could keep going. I couldn't scale it, which was the other option, is like sell it or scale it. Cause
Right.
and the reason I couldn't scale it was one, because of the labor, right? And there's a ton of trucks out there, right? So you want to not saturate either, right? And so then it's like, well, I'd have to put the truck in San Diego. Now I'm going to be trying to get, between San Diego, Orange County, LA. I'm just, so scaling the business, more than just, from a couple trucks is difficult to do. And the people that have done that have gone the franchise route.
Yeah.
But the
I remember we talked about that.
The margins are thin, right?
Mhm.
And so I didn't want to be the guy that's franchising out to someone that's like with thin margins and then asking for a cut. Like, that's not me, right?
Yeah.
I couldn't do that. So yeah, then the pandemic hit and I guess made a decision for me in a way. So the reason we stopped operating in the pandemic, everyone's like, food trucks, oh, it's pandemic proof. You just pull up and social distance and da, 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 da. Well, not really. You need a lot of people to make money. Like and if you have, anywhere under 50 people, it's not really worth your time, right?
Right.
And now in a pandemic, you're trying to find 50 people in one location within a certain amount of time. You don't want to sit there and pay overhead all day, right, to feed 50 people. They're not together, So where were they together? Well, we did a police station because the police were all right. They were all like, right. And we did hospitals. We did, but there wasn't enough. And then all the day-to-day stuff that kept my staff, gave them their hours, right? Office buildings, things like all that stuff was open. So it was hard to sustain. And so I eventually made the decision. I'm like, look, we're going to put this on hold. And so I ended up, I sold my trucks were getting older. So I sold the trucks. Luckily, I walked away debt free, and I still own the brand. So I think given the situation, that's probably maybe, other than like finding some contract that was a daily gig or something to get me through it. But I think it worked out pretty well because I still have that option to turn it back on.
Right.
And that said, there, little insight, like, it is a little stressful having that option because my phone's ringing all day. My email is full. I had, Lucasfilms call me the other day for a 600-person catering for the next Star Wars film. Like,
Wow.
it's like, I get, The Voice and all these TV shows, Blackish, and all these guys that I've had relationships with for the years. They're like, please come back, please come back. And, it's tough to tell them you can't, right? So yeah, that's kind of where that's at now. And then simultaneously, being a serial entrepreneur, I started another
Here we go,
business.
guys. Ready? Here we go now.
We have time.
It's getting good now. Keep going.
Because I'm sick. I mean, now you can see, like, I'm sick in the head, right? So I started a cidery in downtown Long Beach. And this was during that same decision, right? I was like, do I sell? Do I scale? And, with the serial entrepreneur sickness, I started another business that was a few years in development with a next door neighbor of mine, business partner. And
by the way, pre-COVID, right before COVID, they could not have had, I could say you could not have had the worst timing.
Couldn't. We opened January 25th of 2020.
Yep.
After 3+ years of development, and closed March 15th of 2020.
Yep. And I was working with them on the financials and everything, and they started, and then, so yep, keep going, guys.
Yeah. So then it's, that also made the decision. It's like, I can't have two struggling businesses, with a family and everything else during the pandemic. So that made the decision to put BrewWings on hold, because now I've got a huge rent, like lease payment, a brand new business that's really needs my focus to make it through to the other side.
And please do mention names or anything. Lauren will put it in there. So if everybody listening went and bought something, you know,
yeah, yeah, it'd be great.
Advertise it too.
Yeah, it's Ficklewood Cider Works, and we're in downtown Long Beach. We almost share a wall with Roscoe's Chicken and Waffles. So ironic, fried chicken keeps following me around, but yeah, we're right on Broadway, and we're open 7 days a week. And you know, we're making it through. That's probably a whole nother podcast.
Exactly.
But yeah.
And so, you know, when you basically were in the process of opening right during COVID, you tried to pivot a bit to be selling the cider in retail outlets as well. I mean, you've done a lot, not to mention really struggling and staying on top of the government PPP and the loans available. And really, you know, your partner, Joe, especially, I got to tell you, he was vigilant in communicating with the government to try to get things through. So as much as you want to share about those experiences, and also our audience loves the emotional, like how in the world did you keep going? Because I tell you, talking to you guys, there were certain days that I hung up the phone and I thought, man, how are they keeping going? This is really, you really took a lot of hits. I worked with a lot of clients, obviously, during this, but you guys were one of the top ones that took a lot of hits.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really emotional. And you always try to separate business and emotion, but when you're the owner, that's nearly impossible, right? We just kept innovating and kept trying, right? We did get like the RRF, you know, with your support. We did get a small amount of idle, trying to get more, but a lot of complications there because we're a new business, and the idle process is a little more complicated for new businesses, unfortunately, that we haven't got approved for more funding. The city of Long Beach has been great. We did get some grants through there. And then the community really too. I mean, we continued to sell to go throughout that. We tried selling some grocery items throughout all of that.
By the way, I got to share with you, I noticed the chat every once in a while. So Marty says, I went to Ficklewood first time for a comedy show last week. Good stuff.
Nice. Awesome. Yeah, we have comedy once a month. So it's a free comedy show. They bring in six local comics. It's always a good time. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. So yeah, now, and then it's, you know, the thing I think we didn't talk about is whether it's COVID or not, I mean, it's relationships, right? You know, the food truck business is relationship driven. You want to know the best and top trucks. You want to, you know, get in with the biggest venues. And same with Ficklewood, right? And it's like, we got, you know, into Bevmo because one of our contractors' wives worked at Long Beach Bevmo, and she helped request us while I was knocking on the buyer's door at the same time, right?
Yeah.
And it's those kind of like crazy relationships and things that do help out. You know, we were at Disney Food and Wine Festival this year. So for the past 2 months, they've had us on tap. They burned through a ton of kegs, more than we ever would have thought. And that was through, you know, relationships that we had there and relationships I had previously with the food trucks at Disney. And so there's definitely some, you know, it's all about, you know, building new relationships, even if you don't know where they're going to go or why. You know, it's always a learning experience, and it really can't be overstated.
So now that we're getting more of the story out, so you had a food truck, now you got a brick and mortar, really still within the alcohol type, you know, thing, but entertainment and stuff. Give us some thoughts. Was the food truck harder? I mean, obviously it's hard to compare because you went through COVID, but
Yeah.
How do you see the two companies? Do you think maybe Ficklewood may take off more than the food truck ever was going to? What would you say on that?
I'd say Ficklewood has the legs to do that because it can be scaled, right? Whereas with the food trucks, I did get to that point where it's like, hey, Lori, you know, we talked about how many times, like, I don't know how to scale this to the next step, you know, and maybe I could add one more truck, but is it going to be worth all the frustration and like the, you know, so
And my
But
Excel document kept saying no.
right, yeah, I know. We how many times we reworked it. But I think with Ficklewood, we've developed a product that's unique in the industry. Again, right? It's low calorie, low carb, zero sugar, which speaks to me as a diabetic, right?
Oh,
And
yeah.
it's gluten free, which speaks to my business partner who's a celiac. And most other ciders out there aren't dry, aren't low calorie, low carb. They're using concentrates. So we have like a natural product that is completely different, right? It's more like a dry champagne than you would consider it as a cider, right? And so I think, we can bottle it, we can ship it. We're delivering to 48 states. We have,
Wow.
So
That's increased since we last talked, because I remember that you and Joe were really looking at trying to bottle and ship one of our last conversations as a way to bring in revenue when you couldn't open the restaurant for business. So you really have succeeded in that.
Yeah. And I shouldn't say we're shipping to all four. We have the ability to, right? But that's definitely one of our biggest growing segments right now is shipping. And we're starting a cider club, similar to a wine club, where you can sign up and X amount of dollars per quarter and cider shows up on your doorstep.
Okay.
And starting a whole e-commerce campaign around that. And so as our tap room's now open, right, and our sales are at a 45-degree angle, trajectory going up. But
Are people coming in now? Are you seeing that people are coming in and they're comfortable getting out and getting in and maybe even want to now?
Yeah. And Long Beach is pretty sensitive as far as, I live close to Orange County and it's like night and day. But they're pretty sensitive to all the COVID protocols. So even when we were open, but the mask mandate was still in place, it was still, very slow. And then the mask mandate got lifted. And since then, everything's been kind of taking off, right? Now the challenge is, how do you make up for 2 years and, as fast as humanly possible? Right?
Yeah, and you have the cash flow to carry you out, because you really, if at the very beginning I would have said, hey guys, open your business, and then for 2 years you're not going to have any sales, you'd be like, I'm out of here. You would never take that on. And that's where I'm seeing all the small companies too. They don't have the cash flow to carry out for the time period of low sales. And even if they got the idle, the PPP, the RRF, whatever, those were not enough to pay the monthly expenses for the time period that it extended. I always tell people it's going forth, and that's where you really got to be careful, because the cash crunches and all the issues directly related to the last 2 years are going to manifest in the next 6 months to a year. That's going to be the breaking date.
Yeah. And I'm glad that you said it, because I totally agree. And Joe, my business partner, and myself, we both have full-time jobs because we're digging out of a big hole, right?
Right.
So we're trying to balance full-time jobs, families, and grow a business as fast as humanly possible. It's a lot. Yeah,
it is. And in fact, I'm really urging, and that's why I'm doing a lot of these, me and my Excel docs, I'm become famous for my Excel docs. I'm trying to get people to start to analyze the profitability and the cash flow, because I really do believe, this is just Lori, just being in finance and having gone through this, but the big decision making, we thought, people think, oh, we gave them the government money, they're good now. And I really see the next 6 months to the year is going to be the telling signs. And it's like anything, like even with health, if you don't inspect now and know what you got now, you're not making as many option choices down the road when it's grown, whatever disease, if I use that as an analogy. And that's why I'm really telling people, get your numbers right now, because I don't see new funding around the corner.
Yeah, I think all the businesses that were struggling pre-pandemic, we've seen them close, right?
Right.
The businesses that were successful are now struggling, and we're starting to see some of them close, right? And so it's like, gosh, you don't want to be pessimist or anything, but you're walking around and you're like, wow. I read a study that 80% of restaurants are on the verge of closing. And based on the people I've talked to, I'd say that's true, right? So
And I agree. I don't like to be pessimist, but I am a realist, and I'm a realist because I feel like if you really understand what's going on, you can make choices and decisions. And I like being able to have time to respond and not react. And that's where it is. So I fully agree on that. A couple quick questions that somebody has. One is, do you ever rent this is a one-off, but it's still a
Yeah.
good question to ask. And it's, do you ever rent out the space at Ficklewood for an event if somebody wanted to?
Yeah,
Okay,
absolutely.
Damo G asked that question. You get in touch with Stefan and talk to him about renting out the space. We're going to make a sale
Yeah,
happen
I like
now.
it. Yep.
Okay. So he was in the chat and I just noticed it. So she, I'm not sorry. Sorry, I don't know what the first name, but please get, I think Stefan's got his information in the chat. I believe Lauren put it in there. She'll put it in. If it's not, let's get some conversation going between you two.
Yeah.
So I saw that. Now this is also a one-off too. As a female woman, thank you. Sorry. So this is a one-off too. Somebody has Carlos. He is looking for an engineer to help with a prototype, and he said he's got a little bit long here, so I'm reading. He reached out to universities in which engineering work, maybe a research project. Any advice you can give him to try to find somebody to help him with a prototype that he needs manufactured?
It's a little bit outside of my world, but
I know.
yeah, I think he's doing the right things, like checking with the universities is where I would start. And then depending on the product, and what technology is required to make it, that would probably be the next step, looking for local shops to even, have those discussions with. Check, and I've used LinkedIn too, if it's like a
Yeah.
machine part or something like that. Let's say, look at local machine shops, and even if it's all about relationships, even if the person that finally responds to you, and it's, 1 out of every 50 respond or whatever, they may know somebody that can help you, right? So
That's good advice. And like what you said, 1 out of 50 in relationships. And I think and I'm going to, give you my opinion on it and see what your thoughts are. Going up through entrepreneurial world and being involved in business my whole life and getting advice since I was a kid, it was, relationships. You hear that, right? So there was a time period, especially when I was a banker and I was involved in investment banking. I was going to all these things and shaking a ton of hands because the belief I had, which was told to me, you got to meet a ton of people. But at the end of the day, given where I am in my career, I bet you there was 5 good people that really made differences in introduction. I mean, even far from the SBDC, why I'm here was an introduction, 15 years ago. So I think that there's a fine line between just trying to go meet everybody and being very specific and precise in who you meet. What's your thoughts and advice on that?
Yeah, I think I totally agree. I think it's always better to have a specific question, right? Or request, right? Because if it's an open-ended reach out or open-ended, it's like, okay, everybody moves on. But if it's pointed to like one person and it's something that they're emotionally or business tied to, then there's more, I think, there's more chance of success of them responding and then like starting that discussion. And there's various ways to do it too. If you're like, hey, there was someone I really wanted to connect with, and I looked at them on LinkedIn and saw what they were into, and they started a book business, and I bought a book and read it to my kids, and it was cool because I was helping a small business out. And I said, hey, thanks for the book, and open the discussion that way, right? And then that ended up developing into something that helps. So yeah, it's having, yeah.
And we're getting near the end. I want to ask another question on your opinion that I think you're a good one to get this advice for the audience. Throughout the time period of all your companies, as much as you totally put, your equity, your money, your sweat equity, you put a lot of risk into things. You also always recognize that you had to make sure you could buy a quart of milk. That's my famous saying, you always got to buy a quart of milk. And too often Hollywood gets these young entrepreneurs, I say young meaning not age, but just people starting this, to believe that just have enough passion and jump in and it's all going to be okay. And, you saw the things that unimaginable that could happen to both your businesses at the same time. So what words of advice would you give to somebody to find that fine line between having passion, taking risk, but also be sensible about where you are and knowing when to pull back?
Yeah. So it's super important to be emotional and have your emotions in it. And it's equally important to be able to strip those away and have a, hard cost finance, business mindset. And it's always a balance. And I think that that's one of the things I've learned to do, and is very difficult because it's like, well, I love chicken wings. That's why I started the food truck, right? But when I found out chicken wings were one of the highest cost items, I had to figure out, how do I pivot a little to include menu items that would help my margins out, right? And not get too tied up in the emotions of it, because at the end of the day, it's what's the rapper say? If it doesn't make dollars, it doesn't make sense. Right? And so that's always, and as an entrepreneur, there's a million things that you can do. It's an unending list. So I always ask myself at the end of the day, okay, if I do this, how does it impact the bottom line? How does it put more money in the bank? And if it doesn't, then that's not what I need to be focusing my time on, because there's so many distractions and there's so many things, and you could get caught up just, designing a menu, right? And you could spend, 6 months designing a menu. It's like, well, is that going to give you an extra sale because your menu has this on it or that? It's kind of hard to say. Really, maybe you should be focusing some of that time elsewhere where it will hit your bank account, right? But it's always that game between emotions and finances, and your emotions can take you down a path. And I've had it happen a million times where you always got to check yourself. It's like, okay, I like this. This is fun, or I feel like but is this going to make an extra sale, right? And I'll just give one quick example of that. There's a lot of food trucks that I saw come and go, and they failed for one primary reason. And I'm sure there were others, but the one that was visible as a customer and as a, partner, whatever, was their menu was huge, right? And there were so many options because they were chefs a lot of times, and they wanted to share everything with the world. And that's great. But you've got to dial it in. Like with BrewWings, what I always tell my employees, we're the in and out of chicken. We have a quantifiable amount of things on this truck. There was 100 items on my truck that included everything from napkins to chicken, right? And maintenance and oil for the truck and everything. 100 items, that's manageable, right? Of that, maybe 50 of them were interacted with every day. Any more than that, right? So, and if you look at our menu, there were multiple menu items that were made up of similar ingredients, but totally different, right? And so it allowed us to keep our costs down. And even though, yeah, I wanted to do the next big thing, the vegan this and that, is that the demographic that I'm serving? Is that going to give me the extra sale? You have this great idea, but is it going to change your bottom line? And it's just a question you have to remind yourself to ask every day.
Yeah, and what's great about that, and I hope everybody in the audience is noticing this, is that every guest we have on, at the end of the day, even if they didn't start their business talking this way, by the end of the day, they're talking about their bottom line. How do I make another sale? What are my profit margins? These are not the things that people talk about when they start, but they're the things they talk about eventually. And I am just out here to say, how do you get to the point? Please get to the point. Talk about it from the very beginning. Me, talk about it at the beginning, yep. Talk about it in Excel. Well, this has been a fascinating interview. As always, a very interesting story. I'm sure everybody can see why I brought you on now, because it really is not just about a food truck. It's about a food truck. It's about starting other companies. It's about living through and still continuing to live through probably the worst disaster that any company would ever have had to experience, and still coming out with a smile on your face and doing whatever it takes to succeed. And it's just a fascinating story. So to any of you in the audience audience that are in a crow's fly of Ficklewood, knock on the door and say
Yeah,
hello
please.
and come in and visit them for a comedy show. Stefan's still out there trying to make his company work, him and Joe's company work. So any visit to the company would be greatly appreciated. Any last words you want to say?
I will say on the Ficklewood website, you can order it, regardless of where you live. You pay shipping, which is not very much, and then our regular cost. So it's a pretty good deal to get some great cider delivered to your house.
Awesome.
Ficklewood.com. Yeah.
Awesome. Hey, Lauren, gonna bring you back on it. I saw that you put in the chat that you love Ficklewood too.
I totally do. And my I think it was one Grand Prix that BrewWings was out, or maybe it was like the pre-events, and we totally ate up a lot of wings that night. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
We are huge fans.
Awesome.
Well, Lauren is another great interview, and man, are we not learning a lot from each of our guests? And it's really awesome that we have the audience, and I just couldn't be happy enough. I think that these are life lessons, these are business lessons. Next week we're going to hear about another story, but one of the things that I hope that everybody's taken away is, like you always call me, Lauren, the guru of all numbers. I hope everybody in the audience becomes a guru of all their numbers.
Well put, Lori. I love that. Oh, looks like Damo is back. Okay, so there are a couple of questions that I'm seeing in the chat, and what I'll do is just forward them over to you, Lori.
Okay.
Maybe afterwards, because
Perfect.
I know we're past our time at this point.
Yep.
Thank you so much, Stefano. Hearing from you, first off, like I said, I was already a fan, and now hearing your story and knowing where you come from is it was just amazing and draws the connection even more. So that's what I love about these interviews, Lori, just the authenticity and just everyone just being so open and willing to speak. So
I know that's what I love about SmallBiz Talk. Like I always said, I used to hate when I was struggling, watch these. Well, I was started out, I couldn't pay my rent, and now I have a Ferrari, and I hang up feeling, oh, even worse.
Yeah.
I really loved, just true life stories, true human experiences, and that's what this show's about. And we're really fortunate to have the guests that share. Well, Stefan, good to see you, my friend. I'm out there. You and Joe just reach out to me at any time. I know you guys do and have for a very long time, and I'm always out here to support you guys.
Absolutely. Always appreciate it. It's always fun to talk with you. So thanks for having me on.
You're welcome. Well, Lauren, we're going to leave you behind. You can do the last minute. To anybody out there that wants to get in touch with me or has any questions or anything at all, you get to Lauren. I think I've answered and scheduled with everybody that wants to meet with me. If you didn't hear back from me, please hit Lauren up again. We love to hear from you, and I greatly appreciate everybody here. And then, next week, Lauren, we got to make sure we mention the dance that we got from Emma. And I'm thinking on June 1st, maybe Emma will give us a little demonstration. So we haven't forgot about that. We got a really killer video from Emma. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Don't let me forget for that next week. So with that, Stefan, I'm going to say goodbye. Lauren, goodbye. Bye to the audience. And I will see everybody next week. Bye-bye.
Bye, Lori. Bye, Stefano. Thank you again.
Bye. Cheers.
So for those of you who are still with me, I'm going to include a few very helpful links. Again, here is the link to our YouTube so that you can check out our previous shows. If you would like to become an SBDC client, I'm also including a link there for you. And then to connect with Lori and set up a meeting, like what she just mentioned, there's my email. Please send me an email and just put your request in there so that I know, what you're in need of. And then finally, I'm going to re-include Stefano's contact information. Again, he's with BrewWings as well as Ficklewood Cider Works. For those of you who are from Long Beach or have been to Long Beach and know the brands, his items are just absolutely delicious. So please be sure to support him as well as, all of those that have been on our show, as well as those of you who have been including your information in our chat. So again, thank you so much. We look forward to seeing you again next Wednesday, 10 a.m. for another episode of SmallBiz Talk, solutions for your small business. Take care. Have a great week. Thanks.